mental representations of related things. A concept may represent all examples of a physical object, say a shoe, or an event, such as walking, a living organism, such as a person, an attribute, such as fast, or even an abstraction, such as love. Some concepts are remarkably complex, as demonstrated by these symbolic cave paintings made by Australian Aborigines. These, for instance, are gods who make lightning, which in turn brings rain, which in turn makes life possible. Our imaginations can construct concepts that link virtually any elements into a coherent relationship. The Aborigines also have a category that includes women, fire, and all dangerous things. In their mythology, the sun is the wife of the moon, which links women as wives to the sun. And of course, the sun gives off heat like fire does. So fire is linked to women too. And because fire is dangerous, all dangerous things are thrown into the pot for good measure. But how do we store a concept in our minds? Do we have a definition of a bird, for instance, locked in our brains that can be read whenever we need it? Actually, it's now believed that many of our concepts include a representation of the most typical member of a category, called a prototype. For example, we tend to have in our minds a prototype of bird that most resembles a robin, while few of us think of a turkey as the prototypical bird, except around Thanksgiving, of course. We also tend to organize concepts in hierarchies. Is this a piece of furniture, a desk chair, or just a chair? For most purposes, we think of it as the latter, just a chair. This so-called basic level in the hierarchy of the concept chair gives us as much detail as we usually need. It's generally believed that most of our thinking about concepts is done on this basic level. Concepts are one way our minds categorize things. But what happens when the information we process contains many concepts? How do we handle complex ideas and experiences? The answer is with schemas. Take this sentence as an example. Jim was upset when he realized he had forgotten to pack the mustard in the basket. Why do we instantly understand what it means? We understand because we've organized a body of information and expectations around a picnic basket schema. Thus, we can infer a great deal about the basket without any other information. We can infer what's likely to be in the basket
Yummy sandwiches.
and what's not.
Snake.
Moreover, when new information clashes with an established schema, there's a violation of our expectations, and our mind reacts instantly.
I love the taste of whipper.
Just compare your reaction to this sentence to this one. This violation of your expectations is detected instantly by your brain even before you're consciously aware of it. Now, sometimes we don't have enough information to activate the right schema. Until we add the right cue. And sometimes we activate the wrong schema entirely. Take a good look at this drawing. It's an example of how our interpretation of new information can become faulty or biased. Try to remember the image you just saw. What do you think was happening there? For a number of research subjects, the knife was perceived to be in the hands of the black man. These subjects reconstructed the information found in the picture around their own bias schemas, in which blacks are always seen as the aggressors. And so the knife changed hands in their mind from the white aggressor to the innocent black man. Here's another way we go wrong. Which is farther north, Seattle or Montreal? And which is farther west, the entrance to the Panama Canal on the Pacific Ocean side or the entrance on the Atlantic side? In fact, Seattle is further north, but we usually think it's Montreal because we picture Canada as always being north of the U.S. And it's the Atlantic entrance of the canal that's further west, despite our assumption that the Pacific is always west of the Atlantic. What's happened is that we've been led astray by the mental maps we have in our minds. These maps can enlarge nearby familiar places and foreshorten faraway places, like this satirical picture of the world from a Bostonian's perspective. We also store mental pictures of objects like this one and scan them in our minds in much the same way we scan actual objects with our eyes. Now think back to the picture of the motorboat. Did it have a windshield? Did it have an anchor? When researcher Steve Koslin asked subjects each of these questions, they tried to answer as fast as they could by pressing a button. The results indicated that it took them longer to remember that there was an anchor than a windshield. This longer reaction time was taken to mean that the subjects were scanning a visual image of the motorboat in their minds. And because the anchor was farther away than the windshield, when they scanned the image starting from the back of the boat, it took longer to see the anchor with the mind's eye. A similar result occurred when subjects were asked whether each of these letters was a normal R or a mirror image. The further the R had been rotated, the longer it took subjects to answer, because in their minds they had to rotate the R's back into an upright position. Unlike computers, we humans often process information inefficiently. When subjects are asked to plan a shopping trip, for instance, they do so by skipping back and forth. That's because instead of reasoning out the problem in a direct, linear way, we tend to process information according to the meaning it has for us. If you like going to a bookstore better than going to a drugstore, that's going to affect how you solve the problem of planning a shopping trip. In fact, the content of a problem often determines if and how well we can solve it. If the elements aren't familiar enough, we're apt to have trouble. Although if we were truly logical, the form of the problem, not the content, would be the crucial factor. So even though the human problem solver can be rational, can reason, we aren't designed to be particularly logical. And that's where we part company with computers.
I think that the very fact that we have used the computer as a model of thinking has showed us many ways in which human beings are not terribly rational, ways in which we do stereotypical kinds of thinking, prejudicial kind of thinking, thinking which proceeds from an image rather than from a set of reasoned propositions. And the paradox is it was only by using the computer as a model of thinking that we saw the various ways in which human beings actually deviate from that kind of systematic, logical, step-by-step rationality.
While researchers have been trying to understand the functioning of the mind, both rational and irrational, most have tended to overlook the machine that actually runs us. But now, some cognitive scientists are starting to ask how the physiology of the brain enables us to reason, learn, and remember. Michael Posner of the University of Oregon uses brain imaging techniques to explore what parts of the brain are used in specific cognitive tasks, such as reading.
Recently, it's become possible to study problems like reading in normal people by